For everyone here, welcome, welcome. This is my dear friend, Mark Dooley. We've known each other for decades at this point, hard to
Yes.
believe. Back before he was either one of us were identified as neuroexpansive or autistic. And since then, he's gone on to do some amazing things with his own identification and the work he does as a counselor. So hopefully everybody's here. I'll turn it over to him soon. But let me just do a little caveat. This is a new thing, but I just want to put it out there. If you are an ally, if you don't consider yourself autistic or neuroexpansive, welcome, welcome. So glad you're here. But as far as I know, this is the only place in the world where autistic people can come and define, explore, and generate their own culture without judgment and without blowback. And so autistic voices come first. Questions, always welcome. But please let the participants have their own feelings, their own views, and their own ways of communicating. At the end of the meeting today, I wanted to talk to you all a little bit more about something specific I think we should do in terms of not editing these videos, because I think autistic culture as relational, we actually lose a lot when we start to slickly package what we're putting out there. So we can talk about that after Mark gives us his words of wisdom. So I will turn it over to you to run however you like.
Well, thanks, Donna. And I know this is an hour. I bumped the rest of my day back 15 minutes, so I can hang in, for a few more minutes afterwards if there's more. And yeah, I'll just jump in. I've got lots of notes, lots of ideas. This sort of presenting is a very new experience for me. Really glad to be here today. And I'll say over the weeks leading up to our visit, I've been excited and nervous, excited. Right now, I'm just trying to be calm and psyched. So I'll jump in. Autos from the Greek is self. Ism from the Greek is being. Being experienced is state, condition, action, practice, intuition. AU is the chemical abbreviation for gold. To be oneself is golden. One may therefore know autism as a golden state. Condition, action, practice, intuition of being oneself. When I speak of autism, I speak in honor and recognition of unseen autistic elders passed on both sides of my family tree. When I speak of autism, I speak in appreciation of all autistics. And I thank Dawn and Roger for the privilege of being here today. And if it wasn't for Dawn, who I think since my autism long before I had any inkling of my autism, saving my life 20 years or so ago, I might not be here at all. All right. Dawn and I were chatting at a close mutual friend's birthday party. It was a Halloween party, actually. It's a Halloween party. And as part of an autistically obscure Bob Dylan song character costume, I had a coffin nail dangling out of my mouth, okay, which Dawn identified as galvanized, okay. Dawn then alerted me to the fact that given how far into the party I was, okay, sucking on this galvanized nail was placing within minutes of death by toxicity. So thanks again, Dawn. Yeah. And I think at one point later in the co-op parking lot, I thanked you for that. And I think you said I was to be your minion or something. So here I am at your service. I'm going to present my experience today in 4 sections. And Dawn asked me to talk about my experience. That's what I'm doing. And the 4 sections, I'm formulating this as a working model for experiencing autistic identity. The four sections or the 4 stages I'm working with right now: discovery, acceptance, integration, and expression. All right, and that is spelled, or that comes out to DAIE. I went and looked up DAIE and was delighted to find that it happens to be the archaic spelling of day, the ancient archaic spelling of day, which speaks to me of the dawn of a day, light of day, every day, and every new day. Okay. For each overlapping stage of autistic identity, I propose an inquiry and an answer. and I'll ask for questions and comments after each section. I welcome questions and comments in the midst of sections. Feel free to interrupt, jump in. I'd really like this to be interactive, okay, and an experience, okay? And then first, something recent and random. A while ago, I was snuggling with my dog, and I thought, his face looks like a manatee face. So I did an image search for manatee faces. His face does look like a manatee's face. Okay. Then I wondered, what is a manatee's personality like? So I searched, what is a manatee's personality like? And found, what is the behavior of a manatee? Manatees are non-aggressive, non-territorial herbivores that spend most of their time feeding, 6 to 8 hours per day, and resting, 2 to 12 hours per day. The remainder of their day is spent traveling, investigating objects, and socializing by interacting with other manatees. That sounds like a pretty good existence to me. So today, for this hour, I'd like to be a manatee, traveling, investigating, interacting with other manatees. And I elicit Indra's web of interdependent co-arising. Okay, the image here is that every woven juncture of this web is a gem that reflects every other gem and juncture. And I believe autism is similarly holographic. We all reflect each other in a dearth or absence of reflection from neurotypical institutions and culture. We each contain and reflect an individuality, unique facet of a neurological, physiological, phenomenological whole. We reflect ourselves and our neurotype back into society and culture in a way that often, I believe, benefits this society and culture, even if in many ways unseen. Sometimes that's at the expense of the autistic individuals and at the expense of autistic culture. Neurotypicals who seek to see autistics reflecting and reflectively are also holographic gemstones in what I see as a neuro-expansive web of consciousness. And I'm learning and discovering it's critical that we autistics reflect well within and amongst ourselves for sustenance. As an autistic psychotherapist who didn't know he was autistic, 19 and a half years into practicing psychotherapy, my reflection went from intuitive, unaware vibing with my autistic clients and acquaintances to intuitive, lovely, aware vibing with my autistic clients and acquaintances. Awareness of my autistic vibing with all my clients and acquaintances continues deepening every aspect of my practice. And this is not just about being autistic or being a therapist or being an autistic therapist. This is about being sometimes uniquely human. Any thoughts moving along? All right. Discovery. Inquiry. Well, what is my autism story? Answer. This is my autism story. I'll begin the story of my late diagnosis. After I put myself to bed in an evening meltdown over household miscommunication and confusion, my then 11-year-old son asked, with the concern that I might not ever change, is Dad autistic? I woke fitfully at dawn to a texted article and an autism questionnaire. I read, I fell into shock, I wept, I slipped back into bed. I woke again in bright morning, day, light, with a head full of questions. Too many to go into or go all over here, but the first three were formative. My first big question was, how can I be a therapist if I'm autistic? And keep in mind, this is my career, and it took me a long time to figure this out. I was really identified with career, okay, and my role. How can I be a therapist if I'm autistic? I Googled that and found this article by autistic therapist Natalie Engelbrecht. She's got a lot to say here, and I wanted to edit it down, but I just couldn't, okay, because it's all so true. Natalie writes, I have deep, deep empathy, so it is automatic, and I feel a tremendous pride towards these people that I feel are fantastically brave enough to look deeply into themselves such that they do not repeat the past. I've been told repeatedly that that is part of what makes me really good at what I do, because people feel cared about, and I do not think you can fake that. The people I have worked with have been manipulated and hurt by many of the darkest and most wounded people, and they will see through fakeness. At the same time that my ASD turns my empathy off, my empathy remains on. What does that look like? And how can I have both at the same time? What it feels like to me is that one part of my brain cares deeply and is present in the room for the patient, and another is watching the patient very closely and processing everything about them unconsciously, allowing me to say the correct thing in the appropriate way. I have had to learn to memorize social rules in order to live in a neurotypical world. While neurotypicals learn from these rules intuitively, I've had to be hyper aware of them as I have to consciously apply the rules to every situation. This makes me very good at breaking down the rules and seeing where the patient is applying them in a way that is unhelpful. This makes it possible for me to adapt to my social environment and explain its intricacies. I have zero judgment. It is just not there. Your sexuality, religion, gender identity, diagnosis, your career, none of that registers in any way, good nor bad to me. I see you as a fascinating human being who's developed from genetics and environment. I suspect it is part of the empathy, lack of empathy. One part of me knows that I have shared every dark thought you have ever had, and another knows that these pains and that who you are is a part of how your brain learned to survive and accept your past. You are a product of your malleable brain finding the most brilliant way to survive. So I love being a therapist. It allows me to be helpful to people I respect and care for by utilizing my special skills given to me by ASD. So much of what Natalie describes experiencing exists outside of and far beyond the practice of psychotherapy. And I think that's the point I want to make when I'm sharing my story, and that's where it's holographic, okay, that I really see this as relating to, to all of us as human beings, as neurodivergent human beings, as autistic human beings, okay? That this exists outside and so far beyond the practice of psychotherapy and passionate autistic endeavors across a variety of pursuits and disciplines. Back to me now. Then a seismic gestalt shift occurred, a shift that has now become an intermittent flow and grappling state of witnessing, appreciating, and hopefully helping catalyze autistic identity as it arises in my life and life circles. My next big question was, how could I have missed this? I poured over every standard and non-standard autism psychometric I could lay my eyes on. I was stunned and sheepish, even ashamed to have not known this about myself. After taking the camouflaging autistic traits questionnaire, or the CATQ, and burning past the threshold and the mean, missing and being missed made great sense. You mean everybody doesn't do that to get along and get by? I have fun asking neurotypicals if they do things like plan topics of conversation in advance to, getting together for dinner, or after you're getting together with people, do you think about everything you said and how it fit and how it worked? Okay, I thought everybody did that. And what I get is, no, I just show up and talk to people, right? I just visit. Wow, okay. So it made a whole lot of sense. And I've told people, if you want to know the story of my life, look at that test. And when I see a high CATQ score, I see exceptional, likely painful adaptation. Then I saw how therapy is a place, a unique, sacred place in which I become quite unmasked. My third question was, how do I share this? I realized immediately that being secretive or overly discreet about my autism would, in my mind, perpetuate social stigma and then reinforce my own internalized self-stigma. So I carried this third question especially into my new, unanticipated personal and professional journey. I was formally diagnosed March 21st, 2019, the vernal equinox, 2 days before my 51st birthday. A personal gift. The following day, walking downtown with my son for our long-standing coffee and waffles ritual, I thanked him humbly and sincerely for this discovery. I now recognize myself as one member of a wide, lost generation of autistics coming of age far before any true understanding of autism. Asperger's didn't enter the DSM until I was 27, 1994. A lost generation following multiple lost generations back to the possible distant past point in human history when autistics were simply known and understood as impeccable foragers, psychic sharers, values holders, problem solvers, creators, go their own wayers, and spice of life community members. There's a natural break here. Any questions or comments?
Bravo.
Oh, thanks.
I can't stop nodding my head.
Oh, well, thanks,
Preach.
Don. You're anchoring me. And this is so far out of my wheelhouse because my job is about staying out of the way and let other people talk. Okay.
Yes, I'm
My
glad
job
to
is about
I can
not
afford to.
talking. Yeah, my job is about not talking very, very much at all. So so thank you. I'll keep going. If I keep going, I may run out of material before the hour, but then we can visit. Okay.
Totally
So no
cool.
questions. I'll move on to the next phase. Thanks, Don. And thanks to the rest of you. Acceptance, inquiry. Who am I really? Answer. This is a good thing, really. I chose formal diagnosis for sake of personal validation of my professional identity. And I understand, I fully support self-diagnosis. It's widely accepted in the autistic community. There are all sorts of reasons to not get a formal diagnosis. The idea that a self-diagnosis would not be valid, I disagree with that strongly. For me, it was a very personal decision. And part of the reason I chose that, I wanted to be prepared in case people said, you don't seem autistic. Turns out pretty much no one said that. I even told one of my very best friends, you can still call me Rain Man, dude. And he'd figured it out. We'd been buddies for a while, and I think it'd been 3 annual camping trips in a row. Okay. And after these 3 consecutive camping trips, I think we're probably on 10 or 12 consecutive now. He started calling me Rain Man, okay, because he saw it. He saw the patterns. Okay, he saw the routines. I think he saw smoke coming out of my ears if I couldn't do things the way I was used to doing these things. Watching the film Blade Runner for the 4th time since its screen debut. Okay, when I saw it for the first time, watching the film Blade Runner for the 4th time since its screen debut. This time with my son, per his request, it hit me. This is all about autism. Okay, and there's all sorts of stuff on that. I looked it up. Wow, it really is. Reviewer Nick Ferguson writes that replicants become more human than human by expressing empathy, sacrificing for one another, and proving that how one comes into the world matters less than what they do on it. Memory is integral to this awakening, and its deep exploration creates a compelling thesis. Who we are largely depends on what we remember. Or in the case of replicant Roy Batty in the film's climax, choosing to remember one's true experience, even as another, over corporate or societal implanted identity. And I've got the audio queued up here, so I'm going to see if it goes. I love the scene. I love the ambiance, the music provided by Vangelis. Okay, this is that monologue.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
Did that come through?
Looks like the first half did, and then it cut out. But
I'm gonna read it, and I'm right with you, Don. This brings tears to my eyes every time. And watching that movie, I mean, I'll go into a little bit more. It hit me at several levels. Okay, and there are so many levels. Okay, and I don't want to, if we're too niche here, or talking about a film that other people haven't seen, I want to respect that, not spend too much time. But I read into it because it hit me so hard, and I thought there's no way this is just my projection. And indeed, the novel that this film is based on, Do Electric Sheep Dream of, I can't remember the exact title, but a Philip K. Dick novel. The novel, the replicants have implanted memories and experiences and are slaves on other planets for humans, but they come back down to Earth because they want to be equal. So In the novel, apparently they were portrayed as psychotic, that Ridley Scott chose to portray them as autistic. And in one of the early scenes, an interview that's designed at seeing if a replicant is human or a replicant, because they blend in, is based on an early autistic questionnaire. Okay, a very rudimentary autistic questionnaire. Daryl Hannah, who plays one of the replicants, is autistic. Okay, another thing that I enjoy doing, and I do it every now and then to see when it's updated, and I encourage clients in the discovery phase to do an internet search on autistic celebrities. David Byrne came out of the Talking Heads as autistic a month ago, and there was a delightful interview on the NPR page, and it was just wonderful. So I love that. Daryl Hannah's autistic, a lot of other themes in there. I'm going to read the lines from that scene again, okay, since maybe it didn't go all the way through. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain, time to die. And this is a scene in which Roy chooses to save Harrison Ford, okay, who in another plot twist may very well be a replicant himself and not know it. Even though Harrison Ford has been trying to track him down and destroy him, he saves Harrison Ford as his life runs out so that his memories will be passed along to somebody meaningfully. So I experienced a brief autism denial phase when really I wanted it to be true for making so much sense of my whole life finally. But I had to examine the denial. This is also very autistic, I've learned. I think there needs to be a bonus question on every autistic questionnaire that are you going over and over and over and over about whether or not you're autistic? Okay, bonus points, okay? Maybe I'm not autistic because I had really good high school friends. Yeah, those guys. Maybe I'm not autistic because I never had accommodations. Wait, I'm sitting here in this office, which is my own little autism chamber, with its green walls, dim lights, psychology, philosophy, poetry books, little special objects, right? Okay. I've been accommodating my whole life. Okay. I grew up in a culture that allowed me to blend in a little bit more. Okay. Midwest, small town. Okay. Things were a little more low key. People weren't as concerned about social skills, okay, as they are in other areas. I've been accommodating my whole life. Other lifelong intuitive accommodations include self-directed education, self-employment, relentless minimalism, incorporation of meaning into all pursuits, and a lifestyle of usually functional, self-soothing routines and rituals. And stimming my whole life. I mean, I had no idea. Okay. I mean, I've been doing it out of camera here. Okay. But stimming my whole life, or really self-regulating, because that's what stimming is. All right. In hindsight, I hold regret for blind spots and missing autistic clients. It dawned on me in my discovery and acceptance phase that I'd had a handful of clients who were clearly autistic and I wasn't able to identify it and therefore help them with that. Okay. And that ate away at me for a while. I gave myself credit, and some grace. We're learning more about autism year by year, and it's exponential. So there were things that weren't understood or weren't known. This is the stigma. Okay, as therapists, that's something that a lot of times you don't want to lay that on anybody. You don't want to tell somebody they're autistic, or you don't want to tell somebody you think their kid might be autistic. That's the stigma. Okay, that's not how I feel about it. Okay, but that's what it was. And then what I really got was I didn't identify my autistic clients because they were so much like me, okay, that I thought we were all just this way, pretty normal. And I actually worked with a couple where the wife's like, "You think my husband's autistic?" I'm like, "No, I don't think so. My therapist thinks he might be." I'm like, I think he's good." Whoa. So yeah, so I definitely hold regret for that. I've talked to other colleagues and peers who are autistic, and we've all had these experiences in our lives. So what was happening there was I'm thinking this is a really good therapeutic relationship, all right, when I was actually vibing with another autistic. okay, which probably did make, and I know it does make for a really good therapeutic relationship, but it blinded me even further to any of our autism, right? Which brings me to the double empathy problem. Are some of you familiar with the double empathy problem or the double empathy concept?
Go ahead and lay it out.
I'll lay it out.
Yes, I'm a big fan of learning about it, and it helped me a lot last year to learn about double empathy.
Do you want to describe it, or do you want me to tell you what I understand about it?
Well, I'm autistic ADHD. And my understanding is that there's a big difference in the way neurotypicals and neurodiverse individuals understand empathy and talking to each other. When two neurotypical people are talking to each other, they understand each other better and have better mind reading than when two neurodiverse people are together. And when you cross the two is when communication differences occur. And there's more to it than that.
That's it. That's it. And when the communication is crossed, who's to blame? Who doesn't have empathy when the communication is crossed?
The autistic person is blamed.
Yes, the autistic person is blamed. Guess what? Guess what? And this is researched. Okay. Who has more cognitive empathy for the alternate neurotype? Okay. Autistics have more cognitive empathy for neurotypicals, typically, than neurotypicals have for autistic. Dawn's nodding because we've spent our whole lives trying to figure this stuff out. Okay. So not only is the autistic to blame, not only is it on the autistic, not only is this part of the, the origins of the really difficult, dangerous myth that autistics don't have empathy, okay? Or that we have effective empathy and don't have cognitive empathy. That's a step up. That's better, okay? Great deals of empathy. The double empathy problem, okay, that's vibing between autistics, that's communication between neurotypicals, that's neurotypicals missing autistics, that's autistic missing neurotypicals. Autistics miss neurotypicals less frequently than neurotypicals miss autistics, okay? The double empathy problem, okay, I'm presenting that in my life, in my experience with other neurodivergent folks, with other neuroexpansives, with other autistics and neurotypicals who are tuning in. I experience it and I'm working on that and look at that as a double empathy benefit. Okay, the double empathy benefit. Questions or comments?
I remember reflecting just yesterday on this very thing and trying to write my emotions about the fact that the oppressed always must know the oppressor. To get by in life, we must, and they do not have to think about it at all. That's across the board in any marginalized, subjugated, monetized group of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it's undiscovered, I mean, I feel very free with this now that it's discovered and understood, right? And most, most people I know and encounter, okay, want to understand it more as well. Okay, I don't feel a remove or a distance from neurotypical people in my life and who are close to my life, okay, because they want to understand, okay, and they're curious. So integration. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate this so much. Thanks so much for discussing this. I think that often that idea of someone needing clinical support, that the idea is that they have something to work on. And I have family who are neurodiverse, and I've been working and supporting in this space for a long time. And I often do trainings and explain to people, if someone is expected to learn something, you can't then blame them for not having learned it. You can't, right? Like as Dawn so perfectly pointed out, the oppressed have to know the oppressor. The oppressors don't know the oppressed. They don't take the time to learn about that. They just oppress. And there's such a huge responsibility in trying to support and engage and help um, folks learn to self-advocate and become in charge of their own path. That it's really important to me, sort of from my line of work, that this is a very sensitive and important topic, and I'm really glad that you're.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. What is your line of work, Marcia?
I work with mostly children, but I also work with teens and adults, mostly with emotion regulation, self-advocacy. I come from a behavioral training history, but the way that I work is a very naturalistic and individualized manner. And I think what I offer to the folks that I work with, regardless of their diagnosis, is that um, I I'm often working with the people around them. So to try and have parents understand their children and to appreciate and to understand the way that their children are communicating.
It's critical. Yeah, really important. And thanks for the input. Integration, inquiry. How does my life fit all together now? Answer, my life may now fit wonderfully like this. This is my integration, my life. I melt down less frequently and with less intensity. I've come to experience more deeply informed relationships with my closest friends and family members. And as I was going over my notes in preparation, it's so much more than that. You know, I feel like I have more deeply informed relationships when I go to my favorite coffee shop or interact with my favorite baristas. I feel like I have more informed relationships just moving through the world. So certainly, okay, more deeply informed relationship with close friends and family members, but with everybody I encounter. And I think part of that is just kind of moving through the world with more ease and the ease of understanding more about who we are. I've developed a newfound ability to express and explain my ways of being. I got a brand new psychotherapeutic specialty, okay, which was exciting. And I don't know if I mentioned this before. I've been working with autistic folks from the very beginning of my practice, and I've always had several on my caseload, and I've done a few trainings, and I always felt really comfortable, and it worked well, and they kept coming back. And then since my own discovery, I found that autistic clients I've been seeing for years who they didn't know they were autistic, and I didn't know that we've discovered that together. I've had more people coming into my practice, not because they know of my specialty, who are just drawn to it or somehow were there. So that's just been wonderful. And this is an experience that I've heard from other autistic therapists and neurodivergent therapists. So the new psychotherapeutic specialty has been enlivening. Dawn posed some specific questions for today's event, which I'll address now. I would love to hear more about your approach and how autistic counselors for autistic people provide a completely different experience than the expert client model. And I'm going to start with self-disclosure. Okay, traditionally in psychotherapy, we're talking, Freudian psychoanalytics, the whole blank screen model, that you can't know anything about your therapist. You don't even want to look at your therapist, okay, because it's all about transference and that the therapist is a blank screen. That's not widely practiced. Even psychoanalytic practitioners value the relationship and engage the relationship, but that's where this all began. So self-disclosure in current therapy, most of which is relational, is understood from a feminist perspective. Okay, feminist psychotherapy is that there is no hierarchy, there's no transparency, there's all transparency. There's no expert, there's no expert learner, that the process is transparent, that it's collaborative. I gravitated towards that model as a therapy client before I believe that maybe I wasn't too confused to be a therapist myself at some point. Okay, so that's where we're starting, that if it serves the client's best interests, self-disclosure it's okay here and there. Most of us, or many of us, understand that if it serves the relationship, it serves the client. I've had clients say, yeah, I want to know more about you, because how can I have a relationship with you if I don't know more about you off the couch or outside of the therapy office? So beginning with self-disclosure regarding autism, this is about my own autism, when and how. All right. And I got a lot of consultation on this from neurodivergent therapists, from neurotypical colleagues. What I came up with, and this is what's worked for me, and I've bounced it off other therapists, and this is kind of how I work with self-disclosure on other issues. The point at which it would be, or feel to me, disingenuous not to disclose, I disclose. And that's kind of the point at which where I know somebody who, or I have a friend who, or if somebody's like this, if I'm talking about autism in a way that's from the inside out, and it's extra work to keep it that way, that's when I self-disclose. And it's spontaneous, almost always. Sometimes I'll think about it ahead of time, or when is it going to be beneficial for this client. But when not disclosing would be disingenuous, I disclose. The response to disclosure has been really interesting. It's been fascinating. Okay, it's been really validating. All right. The first question I ask after any self-disclosure is, what was that like for you? When I'm disclosing my autism, so what's it like to find out your therapist is autistic? Yeah. And it's been overwhelmingly positive. It's been overwhelmingly positive from neurodivergent clients and neurotypical clients alike. With neurotypical clients, it may be like, well, how do you remember all this stuff like this? Or what's that? Or we're talking about somebody whose family member or spouse might be, and I'm really digging in. Okay. There are people who are like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, that's fine. And we move on. There are people who have questions. I make sure they understand that it's not about me. Okay, with clients who we may be working with autism, I make it really clear that I'm not trying to get people into the club, right? I'm sharing that so you know my experience, okay, and where I come from. But it's just been wonderful. It's been overwhelmingly positive. I don't assume that it always will be. I'm wide open to the possibility of losing a client because of that, but I just don't see it happening. And that's not what I'm hearing from other therapists. I find that my autistic clients especially appreciate it because we're all in together, it's relatable, and that they really appreciate personal autism stories. And this is a unique deviation from neurotypical counseling. As autistics, we relate through stories. I did that. Well, I did that. I did that. Well, I did that. We interrupt each other sometimes. Okay, we get excited, right? Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. That's one of the ways we relate. Well, I know about this. Okay. I've ventured into that with my autistic clients, always checking, and it's gone really well. And it's a different form of therapy. Okay. And I still monitor it. I still hold back. I still check in. I still try to stay attuned. Okay. And I find that my autistic clients especially appreciate personal autism stories. I think therapy with an autistic therapist and autistic client is safer and more deeply collaborative. My therapeutic philosophy is absolutely about collaboration. In this case, it's a deeper sort of collaboration. I make it really clear, and I have to make sure that I'm not taking my own experience as a therapist in any place or way, or my autistic experience and transposing that or making assumptions about my client's experience. All right. Autistic laws of attraction. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Okay. I've had autistics in my practice since I opened my practice. And there's some of the people who've stuck around, and we're just finding out years later that we're autistic. I have autistic people coming into my practice who don't know they're autistic. Now I have people coming into my practice who are autistic or suspect they're autistic. That's a different starting point. If somebody's coming in and they're questioning autism, okay, or identify as autistic, I'll address that right away. And a couple of years ago, I changed my psychotherapy website to make it clear if you were looking for it. If you're looking for it, it's in there. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to notice it. Okay. I opened a consulting practice last year. I am out as out could be. I am publicly out. I'm out online. Okay. I've been out in my social circles. That was it. You're not, if you Google me, I'm not going to show up all over the place. But if somebody finds my public stuff, I'm autistic. And so that's bringing more people in. Don's next question, how such positive counseling like you do, thanks, Don, okay, can benefit autistic culture in general would also be an interesting thing to hear. First of all, I'm still learning to learn autistic culture. So that's where I'm at. Okay, I'm still learning to learn autistic culture. Transparent autistic counseling in and of itself shares in and expands autistic culture. I think that's at a baseline. All right. Practicing as an openly autistic counselor is witnessing to autistic counseling, witnessing to autistic culture through counseling. Okay. To everybody. Okay. To neurodivergents, to autistics. Okay. To neurotypicals. Practicing as an openly autistic counselor is witnessing to autistic culture. And this understanding and belief is shared by other autistic therapists in my community. Helping autistic clients accept and be themselves and refine and focus their superpowers benefits autistic and neurotypical culture both. And there is some work sometimes about masking. Sometimes we have to mask. How can you mask? How do you need to mask? Okay. If you're masking too much or needing to mask too much, is this a job you need to leave or a situation you need to change? But sometimes it's about these difficult adaptations. How do you mask effectively? How do you mask in a way that, that doesn't wipe you out? Where do you go and who do you meet up with after work or after your day to take that mask off? Okay. So helping autistic clients accept and be themselves doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have to mask, okay, or adapt in that way. I think autistic culture is also furthered by helping family members of autistics understand and appreciate autism. Questions or comments about integration?
There are some questions in the chat, actually.
Oh,
Also,
I tried to look at
someone
that.
mentioned earlier that they were.
I couldn't.
I can read them too.
Here.
So someone.
I can't figure out how to read that. I saw the numbers. I tried to look at it before, and I'm not familiar with Zoom because I use a platform for my therapy.
No, it's fine. I planned on reading them too.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. You wouldn't mind?
Someone said that they got Rain Man. Oh, sorry. I think there's a little bit of audio delay maybe on my end. Someone said that they got Rain Man for the first time last year. Also, someone asked, I'm confused about what cognitive empathy is versus just empathy. I'm extremely empathetic to all people and animals, so I'm confused about the double empathy as well.
Well, that's a great question.
If you want to address that, and then I'll ask the question.
Do you want me to answer that one? Okay. So yeah, so there's this generalized idea of empathy that is neurotypical. All right. And so as researchers were looking at the myth that autistics don't have empathy. Okay. And I think trying to give us the benefit of the doubt, right, and figure it out on our behalf, maybe that they looked at cognitive empathy, which is also known as theory of mind, and that cognitive empathy or theory of mind is being able to think about what it would be like to be another person, okay, through their experience of their mind. And the double empathy problem is if you're vibing with another autistic, you're going to be very able to have that cognitive empathy or theory of mind about the other autistic, very much so, or more likely to occur between neurotypicals. Okay, the double empathy problem occurs between neurodivergents and neurotypicals. Affective empathy, which was a real nod in our direction, affective empathy is feeling, okay? Feeling compassion, feeling the love for an animal, feeling when somebody's hurting, okay? or happy. Affective empathy, deeply feeling. I explained to my son early on with this, okay, that it's not that I don't feel things sometimes. I feel things very deeply. Sometimes I have a hard time expressing my feelings or communicating my feelings. So affective empathy, it's that feeling sense that the question addresses, that I'm very empathic. I feel these things, right? And I think most of us who feel that way could put that into words. We just might not be able to put that into the words that somebody who processes differently understands. Does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I also think of theory of mind as sort of like literal perspective taking. So, a classic example would be that two characters are playing with a ball. One puts the ball into a basket and leaves. The other one sneaks over, takes it out of the basket and hides it under a blanket. Where does the first character think it is? So like they think it's in the basket. So if you're following sort of that magical thinking about what the person's thinking versus not, like, to me that's more of just thoughts rather than empathy is and can be a very physiological experience of like really feeling deeply someone else's feelings. And as you mentioned, autistic folks have an extremely amazing ability in that area often.
Yes.
So someone asked a sort of two-part question. They said, my question is, when another adult accuses you of being angry or explosive while trying to explain yourself. Sometimes when I'm trying to explain myself and I get frustrated with it when I struggle with it and the other person will interrupt my train of thought. Do you have any suggestions? And later said, I feel that when I talk to my adult children, I feel that I'm being angry and explosive when they constantly interrupt my answering their questions, especially when I have problems with texting or computer response. I'm too slow in my responses for them.
Okay. That's really, really difficult. It's really difficult, and it's an ongoing struggle for most of us. And I think if you can help people understand how your brain works and understand that it's going to be better for them to accommodate how your brain works. All right, not over accommodate, but to understand that is a perfect example, I think, of, and this is a part of the autistic neurology, overly persistent thought patterns. Overly persistent thought patterns. What that means is, and this is identified in autistics, if I don't have the list of who's asking the question, so I don't know the name, but if any of you have follow-up questions, you can get my email off my website or find it anywhere else and email me directly, and I'd be glad to do my best to carry the discussion on further for sure. I've got an article that I forward around this overly persistent thought patterns, that when the autistic brain typically has to shift thoughts or shift directions, there's a delay. Okay, this is that intensity of focus, right? Okay, this is one of our superpowers. Okay, but when we have to shift that overly persistent thought pattern, okay, there's a delay, and it's often visible. It's not a quarter second or half second delay. It's like a 3-second delay. And the more overwhelmed we are, the more information that's coming at us, or the more that people aren't given pause, okay, the more that slows down. And people, I've had people, say really mean things about how they thought my brain worked, okay, when I was younger, or even as an adult, because what looks like a freeze, okay, is that overly persistent thought pattern needing to shift gears. So in response to you and your kids, if you don't have that space and they keep going, okay, you're just getting further and further behind the 8 ball, and then it's anxious and it's stressful. So the very best thing that could happen here would be if your children understand more about how your brain works and are willing to work with you on that. And if I were working with you all as a family, I would explain to your children that you're going to have such a better relationship with your mom if you understand this, right? You're going to really get what you want from her. and this is back to what Dawn was saying. It puts, it puts the emphasis, and this is true of anybody who's a minority, an ethnic or racial minority, a sexual minority, somebody with a hidden disability or a visible disability, back to the pressure to educate and advocate to get what we need. Okay, so I would say in the big picture that that the more neurotypical family members and friends are understanding and learning, the better it is for them, because your kids will get to have a better relationship with you.
They answered giving their name. This is asking, and said, "That's exactly it. So true. And I'm age 64 with these things and dyslexia and autism. And thank you for your help."
Oh. So you're doubly exceptional. More questions in there, or do you want me to keep going?
Just said, okay, that she's doubly exceptional, I think. Yes.
And last comment that occurred earlier was understanding cognitive empathy and affective empathy helped me understand that I have more affective empathy as an autistic.
I love that. Yeah.
And then they wrote just now, my son is 18. I was recently diagnosed with autism and ADHD. He is diagnosed with ADHD, but I know he's definitely autistic. He gets very dysregulated if I talk about my special interest, autism. He's willing to get diagnosed, but I can't talk about my autism. How do I educate him without upsetting him?
I think tune in and recognize, and again, I'm wide open to to a side conversation with some of these questions that we can't answer here in depth. I think recognizing where he's at and tuning in. ADHD and autism are often overlapping. ADHD or ADD is often the first domino, and it sometimes is years before the next one comes along. And sometimes once the ADHD has been diagnosed specifically with with young adults, that's enough. And I've observed, this is only observational, some resistance in moving beyond that, because ADHD is enough, and people often start with ADHD because it's less stigmatized, right? I think professionals are more ready and more likely to diagnose ADHD because of that, and that's enough. So I think just giving space and don't waste your breath if he doesn't want to hear about it. And it's in his life, it's in his environment and his life, and hopefully he'll come to it and find it. I recognize that's not a very concrete answer.
No, thank you so much. And that's the end of this right now.
Okay. Well, and let me just, so final section, and this doesn't have to be a long one, and I realize we're at the hour. I've got over the hour, but I'll try to move through this final section fairly quickly. So if folks need to leave at 3, they're free to. Expression, inquiry. How do I resonate authentically now? Answer, I resonated in my deepening connection with self and life. In conversation yesterday, literally just yesterday, with a similarly late discovered autistic client, it dawned on us that as expression may be the culmination of autistic identity in my model that I'm working on, it is also the origin of autistic identity. Long before we autistics knew we were autistic, however far along or early in life we discovered our autism, we were expressing and trying to express our full true selves. Looking back, this is almost always delightfully, sometimes painfully evident. Affinities. My affinities are not only mine, they are autistic. Connections with colleagues and mentors, deep interests, a love of and eidetic memory for people's stories, a drive to never stop learning, the role and lifestyle of my chosen profession, my calling. Gifts and strengths. My gifts and strengths are not only mine, they are autistic. Intensity, curiosity, focus, endurance, commitment, consistency, authenticity, acceptance, pattern recognition, noticing and exploring even the smallest details. Unconditional positive regard comes naturally. I was recently told that my superpower is helping other people discover their superpowers. So I love that. And that's something that really feeds my therapy. A former supervisee observed once that anxious teenage clients felt comfortable with me because of my own quirky anxiety tales and stimming in session. Right. So that I took that in stride. Yeah, that was good to hear. I've accepted myself by accepting and having accepted clients. I've accepted clients by accepting myself. I often have a better coach than player experience with relational therapy, which at times has led to a sense of fraudulence. It's been a real source of distress at times. I bounced this off an autistic colleague and therapist educator, and she explained how our intensively studying, scrutinizing, analyzing, and experiencing phenomena we struggle with can lead to expertise and wisdom, surpassing the awareness of those to whom certain relational patterns come naturally. Okay. And that this expertise and wisdom may even surpass our own personal natural tendencies. Okay, so that's been kind of a personal professional dilemma. It makes sense. Doesn't always make it easier, but it makes sense. I get to try and be the therapist I wish I'd had in my early life. All right, I had a really cool guitar teacher. When I think about the benefits of having therapy earlier in my life or mental health treatment earlier in my life, I realize that it might have done more harm than good. But I get to try and be the therapist I wish I had in my early life. Ongoing identity development personally, ongoing identity development professionally. I saved this for the end, even though it could be at the end, at the beginning. I'm an identity first autistic, and that was a progress or a process for me. Originally, it was I'm on the spectrum. Okay, then it went to I have autism. Then it went to I am autistic. And there's a lot more to say about it. I think most of you can relate. We all get to describe it however we want. Okay, but that's what I've come to, and that's where I'm content and very comfortable. Identity first autistic. I am autistic. I've been able to establish peer relationships with other increasingly out neurodivergent therapists, which has been wonderful. Advocacy, I've recently branched into consulting for the sake of more open, direct relating and working across state lines. Okay, there's more room for disclosure and more room for direct guidance. Okay, it's more targeted. I've positively learned, this is a big one for me, and I share this with a lot of autistic folks and clients. I've positively learned and reminded myself, don't forget, not even for a day, that I am autistic. Don't forget, not even for a day, that I am autistic. For sake of blessings and for sake of challenges, okay, for sake of self-compassion. Don't even forget, not even for a day, that I am autistic. I hold deep gratitude towards my son for seeing the shadow of what I didn't recognize in myself so I could find the bright spots. Okay, I'm still a pain in the ass. Okay, I'll own that. Not always. Gratitude to neurodivergent clients for understanding. Gratitude for neurotypical clients for curiosity. Okay, and in conclusion of the prepared section, I cherish the gift of knowing oneself, of being oneself, the gift of sharing oneself, which I get to do now, and thank you all so much for that. The gift of receiving these gifts from others in return, and I cherish the gift of being right here, right now. And thank you all.
That's brilliant. I mean,
Don.
really, nothing short of brilliant.
Well,
It's
that's
what
sweet.
we need to hear.
What's that?
It's what we need to hear. We, especially those of us who are older, but even still, you know, it happens that we are buried in shame to the point where we can't even function. It breaks me to think about it every day, how it's still going on and how many of us have been robbed of our culture. We had an Indigenous Canadian speaker a few weeks ago who is both autistic and Indigenous. And both in the session and she and I together have been talking about the overlap, the great shared Venn space of neuroexpansivity, extraordinary sensitivity on all levels, and Indigenous ways of relate. You use the word relational, which is beautiful. And I use the word holographic at least 5 times a day. And we've been robbed of that. And to me, it's analogous. I know there are some differences, but it's very much like the Indian residential schools, where we are robbed of our culture. We have been robbed of our culture. And so hearing people like you assert these beautiful cultural strengths is so meaningful, and it lays such a great foundation for what I want to do and what I think all of us want to do.
Well, that's wonderful,
Beautiful.
Don. And it's so natural, and this is what we need to remind ourselves of. And certainly, Don, you're on the vanguard, and you're one of my inspirations, and that that's that you're witnessing has helped me witness. But it's reminding ourselves, and I think I'm reflecting. I had my fifth grade teacher was an absolute bully. She was cruel. She was mean. Okay. And I don't carry a whole lot of trauma. It's an example and a story of how the institutions and some of these individuals carry that on. And I remember that I got pulled out by the school psychologist to get tested for the gifted program. Okay. And it's this, doubly exceptional or triply exceptional autistics. And my fifth grade teacher, I got some vindication because I came back, right? I came back from that. Well, she thought I was getting pulled back to use the word of the time. You know what the word of the time was? She thought I was getting pulled back because of that.
Oh, the R word. The R word.
Yeah, the R word.
Me
So
too. Happened to me too, Mark.
yeah, yeah, and that bullying, okay, that nobody even identifies or calls bullying. And you look back, okay, there's probably not one of us that wasn't bullied.
Yeah. And I'm a fan of, I mean, this is a whole other subject, but I'm a fan of discarding the word bullying because I think it's torture, and I think we should call it torture.
There you go. Yeah. Well, if it's systematic, if it's repetitive, if it's systematic, if it's targeted, it's torture. If it's institutionalized, it's Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm gonna take that on, Don.
Thanks, because I feel like, we've sort of put it in a different category, and then we don't have to deal with the true devastation of it, and how we treat people after they survive it is different. If you say you're bullied and you say I was tortured, it's a different category of experience for sure. Yeah.
Couple things happening in the chat. So, someone said, thank you so much for this great session. I appreciate your help and information. Excellent session. And someone said, would you be willing to consider looking into adding your name to a list of neurodivergent providers at ndtherapist.com? This is where I was able to go to obtain the help in receiving my diagnosis, and where I have referred so many others. And added that shame is a big factor, Dawn, when you were mentioning that. Shame is a big factor. Also, said thank you so much. This was very helpful and enjoyed hearing your personal experiences. And added ways, shame is a big factor, and I'm always home in excess loneliness because no one understood me. But now I'm more comfortable in my discovery area of my autism with dyslexic sensory overload issues. But it's helpful, thanks. Yes, being called R-word and brainless, it was difficult. Then I break myself away from other adults where I live. And then another person added, this is the first time I've ever heard of anyone else who made lists of things to talk about when I had to go to a party. Thank you so much for mentioning
I
that.
thought everybody did that, right? Nope. That's all so relatable. It's so relatable. And yeah, I'd be glad to be on that resource list. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Washington State. I cannot issue a formal diagnosis. Okay. I can diagnose for the record, I can diagnose for insurance or charting. but I can't issue a diagnosis that's understood under the ADA or for accommodations. I also can't work across state lines. I can do consultation across state lines, but I'm wide open to being on any resource list. Okay, that very much so. And thanks for asking. Yeah, gladly.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have anything they want to? We've got a few minutes to talk with Mark, and then I wanted to stay a minute and talk about recording for the future. But while Mark's here, yeah, let's use his great big brain. Although you've kind of said, I mean, you bring it, preach. You pretty much said everything I needed to hear.
Well, good, thanks. Well, and I make a list of things to talk about for, you know, for parties. I also made a big list of things to talk about for this presentation.
I'll just add that this has been really, really incredible. Made another comment. Thank you very much. Excellent session. I know that we all got a lot out of this. Really inspiring, very detailed. And go ahead, you seem. She got up. Okay. Like she might have said something, but oh.
No, I just wanted to thank Mark again. I related so much to so many things that he said, and yeah, I was the one who wrote about the making lists for parties, and I mentioned it one time to a friend of mine, and she just looked at me like I was a freak. It's like, well, how do you know? I mean, how else can you be around a bunch of people who maybe you might not even know? You have to be prepared for that. And she's like, no, you don't.
Go with a friend too. You got to have a buddy there.
That's right. Yeah, that makes a big difference. So thank you so much.
Well, this is such good company, and it's rare to get this sort of company. I had this, I mean, it was a peak experience. I did a 3-day neurodivergent informed clinician training last year, and it was a small training. It was in person, 3 days, and I think there were 16 of us, and 14 of us were neurodivergent. Okay, and it's such a rare experience, and I'm just always inspired and enlivened just to be in this sort of company and to be able to talk about things and kind of stutter around things and have overly persistent thought patterns, and to get the nods and the feedback, and it's just for all of us. I mean, that's the holographic experience that you talk about, Dawn, that I feel, not even knowing that's what you talk about, is how good this feels.
It's a safe place. Yeah. Very safe.
Yes, it is. And we absolutely need that. And one of the biggest points I made when I kind of sold this idea was that you being the establishment, you don't know us. You absolutely don't know us. Theory of mind is an extraordinarily cultural phenomenon. Knowing how someone thinks, why they think that way, what the rules should be, what compassion looks like, whether you trick people or not, like in those theory of mind tests. That's all cultural. That is all cultural. And so what we're creating here is this wonderful uncensored pool of knowledge that allies and ourselves can go to after the fact, or engage in real time and see ourselves reflected, and having a sense of that, as you said, the holographic or the net of Indra, those gems constantly reflecting on all levels like that. It is a peak experience every time.
Well, I've got to run, but that's what I got today. So yeah.
Cool. Well, let's touch base later, Mark, and maybe you could come back. That would be awesome. And
oh, it'd be my
thank
privilege.
you for everything.
Yeah. I'd love it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
so much, Mark.
Yeah.
And everyone else, if you can stay with me for a minute. Bye,
Right.
Mark. Okay, so by the way, good to see you. So I talked about it already a little bit, that we had actually a couple of Indigenous speakers in a row. And we talked about that relational sense of culture, which is so profound in neuroexpansive people. And she recommended a book called Research is, well, I can't find it, but Research is Ceremony. And it's about how the research methods we use in the West obviously, run over Indigenous or relational cultures because of the very nature that the West, modern West, structures information or decides what's relevant or packages ideas, is really anathema or opposite to the very way that Indigenous or autistic culture works. And so after thinking about that quite a bit, I thought this is the methodology I want to adopt for us. I think it just naturally is what we're doing, but in solidarity and also to have some sort of on paper guidance. I feel like it would be great for us to kind of officially adopt that research methodology. I feel like as I've thought about that, it makes it clear that we should not be editing these videos. I think every pause, every interaction, whether people have outbursts or, I mean, all of this it's all part of our relational culture. And I think if we cut it apart, we're really running the risk of essentially just becoming another modern Western product for academia. I don't want that for us. So I would love to hear from you all either now or, send me a message about how you feel about that, because it looks like I will probably be having a meeting with the grant committee to discuss that. Roger has done a brilliant, amazing job of editing the videos in such a way that people outside of our community are really going to appreciate them and gain insight. But at heart, this is by us and for us. And I really want to keep that focus. Yeah, so any comments, any feedback now or sent to me would be much appreciated. I don't want to just make sort of an executive decision since we are so relational. I suspect we're going to agree, but I could be wrong. So yes, that said, anyone have anything to add before we close?
Are you on Facebook so we can speak to you there also?
Yes, I am under Dawn Prince-Hughes, DAWNPRINCE-HUGHES. I think I'm the only one on there with that name. I have the little Yale Y with the CASY logo underneath it as my profile picture. So, if you're looking for me, that's where I am.
I just wrote it in the chat as well, your name.
Perfect. Thank you, Marsha. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that I agree wholeheartedly in what you're saying. I have some Indigenous history in my family, both biologically and also therapeutically. My uncle was one of the first people to address alcoholism in Native American communities and really had to rewrite the approach to it to make it culturally sensitive and appropriate. So I really love that. I do think there has to be a consideration for folks um, who may want to participate but not be recorded, and perhaps if they fully agree that like they will be recorded and that nothing will be edited, then like as long as that's upfront and clear to everyone participating, that's just something to consider.
So yes, thank you for mentioning that. Really grateful you brought that up because there were some caveats. Yes, I think if people want to be anonymous, they should be able to do that for sure. Absolutely. I also
So
don't
like
feel like, sorry, go ahead.
Roger was, I think, Dr. Joe was editing faces and like voices in
Right.
some of them.
Yeah, and I think
So is that
that's a great idea. Yeah, that's totally, I think that's really, really good. Because some people are, you know, in their minds, brains, multitasking. It's a lot. I want them to be completely comfortable to share in their comfort zone. So we should absolutely keep that practice for people who want it. And secondly, I have no intention of showing anyone's meltdown. I think it's like having a seizure. I don't think it's going to teach anybody anything. If we needed to in the video, we could say, you know, this person had a very emotional reaction. We're going to give them their privacy about that. Maybe here's what it was about, or whatever, you know, maybe something like that. But no, nothing that would be voyeuristic or compromise someone's integrity, sovereignty. We don't want to shame anyone for sure. So yeah, we had, to use an example, we had someone in the group some time back have a really emotional response to the way they had been treated. And they were raising their voice. They were on the verge of tears, and they were talking about unaliving themselves. I don't have a problem with the real world word, but I felt personally, because it wasn't a meltdown, it was just heartfelt and it was gripping, and we were all in tears, that should be included with a warning label. Because we have such a high rate of suicide in our group. We're not going to understand that unless we listen to people talk about it in context with their feelings intact. That's just my opinion. Again, happy to hear everyone else. But that's one example where we ended up cutting it out. And later I thought, that's a tough one. I don't think we should have. Yeah. Anything else, Marcia, or anyone else that want clarification about what I'm thinking?
In the chat, I hope Roger doesn't edit out any of the content. I think these should go untouched, except of course for meltdowns or other things such as that. I agree with Dawn. Wrote, thank you for holding space for intersection of autism and other marginalized people. I said thank you, Marcia and Dawn. Thank you, and thanks to everybody who participated so much today. It was a very inspiring and you know, incredible conversation today. Dawn, we are forever grateful to you for making this space and holding this project. So thank you. And of course, I think that after this call, if there's ever any other thoughts that others would like to share, you can reach us. You can reach Dawn at her Facebook, as she said. You can use our emails, and we can discuss the recording issue or anything else that was discussed today.
And Connectivity for Autism, that page, I urge people to join that. Always announcements about what we're doing and what the other people are doing in the cultural arm of our endeavors. So, and thank you, Marcia, for helping me. I can't multitask to save my life, so thank you for reading those. Okay, everybody, thanks again.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem at all. And yeah, when I'm speaking also, I always would prefer for someone to sort of, you know, relay the chat to me rather than trying to do it at the same time. Asked for our emails. So if you want, well, I'll put mine in the chat. I'll put Roger's in the chat. I think that's even better. Dr. Joe is Roger Joe, and it's Roger, Roger .jou@yale.edu. And
I'm
then I'll
happy to
also
give
put
mine as
mine
well.
just so that mine is there. Sure. What's your best email?
So my best email is Dawn Prince, all lowercase, all squished together, 1964 @gmail.
DawnPrince1964 @gmail.com. Okay, great. So I put those emails in the chat. And also, if you aren't already connected to our meetup group for some reason, or you want to find our Facebook pages, or you want to talk about anything that was discussed today or the recordings or anything else, feel free to reach out.
Great. Thanks again, Marcia. And thanks everyone for coming. Always great to spend time with everyone. I feel you there, even if you don't say anything. So we'll have in a few days, we'll have another great speaker. I can't remember who that is off the top of my head. Oh my gosh, so many things. Mark always makes me think of a million things I want to say, and now it's pushed out. But yeah, check who's coming the next couple days. I think it may be Jillian Celentano, who is a trans person who's going to talk about the intersectionality between autism, neuroexpansivity, and different gender expressions. Okay, so with that, I guess we'll say goodbye, and I hope to see you in a few days.
Yeah, I was trying to wait for the schedule to load, so that I could double check that.
Oh, thank you.
January 19th, I have Cultivating Autistic Thought with Sam Farmer.
Oh, he does his own kind of thing where we do two separate sort of sessions.
Okay. That's right. That's right. That's right. And then there's Dr. Dawn Joy Leong on the 20th, on Saturday.
On the yes, that's a
Is that
must
20th?
see. Oh my gosh. Yes,
Mm.
she's joining us from the other side of the world to talk about animals and autism. Oh, cannot wait.
Amazing. Amazing. So yeah, I put the meetup link as well in the chat for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Right.
Marcia.
No problem. Thank you. It was great to see you. And thanks everyone for joining.
Bye, everyone.